Chapter 14. The real causes for dog attacks. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten but the owner shall be quit. But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and this hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. The Bible, Old Testament. Exodus, chapter 21, verses 28, 29. If this punishment seems too harsh, the penalties for owners today who allow their dogs to roam loose and attack individuals are equally too lenient, if not non-existent. The following cases show that canine behavior cannot be examined without examining human behavior. The behavior of the dogs in these incidents was a direct result of the actions, or inactions, of their owners. Case 1. In February of 2003, Vivian Anthony was walking down a street in Columbus, Ohio, when she was attacked by two loose roaming dogs. Her husband managed to fight the dogs off the woman, but she was critically injured. 2 weeks later, as Mrs. Anthony remained on life support in the hospital, another woman was attacked by two loose roaming dogs, near the same location as the first attack. 2 men beat the dogs off the woman. A newly fallen snow allowed police to track the dog's bloody paw prints to a nearby residence. Inside the residence were 3 dogs, along with a newspaper clipping about the first attack. After 53 days on life support, Vivian Anthony, the first victim, died from complications from the attack. DNA sampling of the dogs and the victim's clothing determined the same dogs were involved in the attack on both women. The owner of the dogs, a medical doctor, was charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 1 count of reckless homicide and 1 count of assault. There can be almost no doubt that the owner of these dogs knew of the first attack on Vivian Anthony and the involvement of his dogs. He lived not a half-mile from where she was attacked, he had a newspaper clipping of the incident in his house, and the dogs almost assuredly had to return home after the attack with blood on them. Still, these dogs were permitted to run loose less than 2 weeks later, allowing them to attack another woman. During the trial, the owner admitted to knowing that his dogs escaped often and that they had previously been involved in attacks on 2 other persons. Of the 3 dogs owned by this doctor, 2 were intact males and 1 was a very pregnant female. She was not involved in either attack. The owner pleaded guilty to 1 count of involuntary manslaughter and 1 count of assault. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. Case 2. In 2002, a 2-year-old girl wandered too near a chained dog and was attacked and killed. This intact, male dog had worn the dirt down to a smooth bare surface in the area limited by the chain. The tree to which the dog was chained was devoid of bark as the dog paced for endless days around the tree. After the child was killed, a few neighbors commented that the dog appeared skinny and underfed. The animal control officer stated that the dog was appropriately sized for its breed. The owner of the dog stated in the newspapers, "About the only thing I can say is I'm sorry, but I don't see how I could have stopped it from happening." This was the story reported in the newspapers, and it is incredible in the startling lack of information. Fortunately, law enforcement officials submitted the body of the dog to the state for a necropsy, animal autopsy. What was not revealed in the newspaper accounts or by the owner was that approximately 1 week prior to killing the little girl, the dog had killed a young cat. Now, this is not necessarily indicative of aggression towards humans, or anything else really. Dogs do kill cats. But this dog consumed the cat. Dogs don't eat cats after they kill them, unless something else is terribly wrong. What was wrong with this animal was that it was starving to death. The necropsy determined. The 5-year-old, intact, male weighed only 25 kilograms, or 55 pounds. This full-grown male dog should have weighed between 75 to 95 pounds. The dog was 10 to 12% dehydrated. Dehydration at 10% is considered severe and life-threatening. The intestinal tract contained only small particles of leaves and scant amounts of corn kernels. There was no dog food in the entire intestinal tract. Diagnosis: severe emaciation and malnutrition. Yet, unbelievably, the owner was puzzled as to how he could have prevented this tragedy. Case 3. In 2004, the mother of an 8-year-old boy allowed him to spend spring break at his father's house in Charlotte, North Carolina. One day during the week, the father was in the house with his girlfriend and the boy was playing in the backyard with the father's 4 dogs. Tragically, the dogs began attacking the boy. The father and girlfriend inside the house did not hear the boy's cry for help or his screams. A postman across the street did, though, and ran over in an attempt to save the boy. When he realized he could not help the child by himself, he ran to the door and banged on it for help. The father answered the door and threatened to kill the postman. The boy died. The police arrived and found that the father was a convicted felon, out on parole. Inside the house they found an assault weapon and drugs. The father was arrested for possession of a firearm, possession of illegal drugs and for threatening a federal employee, postal worker. He was also later charged with involuntary manslaughter in the death of his son. A few neighbors warily stated the dogs seemed abused and said they had witnessed the owner beating them. The mother, obviously distressed and grieving for her son, started a petition to rid Charlotte of 3 different breeds of dogs. What many people fail to acknowledge, even those not overcome with grief, is that a convicted felon, out on parole, would have little regard for any legislative efforts that would make ownership of a breed of dog illegal. The fact that it was illegal to be in possession of a firearm or narcotic drugs were no deterrent to this man. It is very doubtful that he would have any regard for a law that banned a particular breed of dog. It is not reasonable to expect normal or amiable behavior from dogs owned by a man who, rather than having intense gratitude, instead threatens to kill the man who is attempting to save the life of his son. Addressing this as a dog breed issue will never solve the problem of canine aggression. Legislators and communities can destroy the dogs, ban breeds, mandate high insurance coverage, require fencing, or signs and any other number of measures to restrict the dog, but no amount of laws, restrictions or breed bans will save the lives of children whose parents allow them to live in such high-risk environments. These are but 3 examples in a 3-year period, 2002 to 2004, showing behavior by owners so extreme in their negligence or criminality that they render the breed of dog a non-issue. There are many more cases like these, some as extreme, others to a lesser degree. This demonstrates that in many cases of severe/fatal aggression it is simply not possible to separate the behavior of the owners from the actions of the dogs. If we were to take the above examples and add the 3 different breeds involved to statistics on fatal dog attacks, what does this accomplish? Can we seriously believe that any of the above owners were true devotees of the breed of dog which they so recklessly abused and/or mismanaged? Do we imagine that banning the breeds of dogs involved in these attacks would prevent them from acquiring another breed of dog and demonstrating equal recklessness? As some politicians and a large portion of the media spin off in the direction of focusing on breeds, fortunately law enforcement personnel work diligently behind the scenes in an attempt to address the real circumstances which permit or encourage some dogs to act so aggressively. Unlike some in the media and some politicians, law enforcement is keenly aware that persons involved in situations in which their dog has attacked and killed someone are liable to be less than truthful about the history, function and prior bad acts committed by their dogs and/or by themselves. Additionally, even if a police officer is personally inclined to believe a particular breed may be aggressive, they conduct a rational and thorough investigation, as is required by their profession. Because of this, law enforcement agencies disseminate the most accurate data and least prejudicial conclusions about the circumstances and factors behind severe/fatal canine aggression. In recent years, some police and sheriff agencies have done extraordinary work in uncovering information and details about the owners and dogs involved in fatal attacks. Based on this information, some cases of fatal dog attacks have been deemed terrible accidents. Others were concluded to have stemmed from low-level negligence or a low level of supervision of dogs/children, coupled with misfortune. Some cases were negligence bordering on criminal and other cases were clearly criminal. The only way to come to conclusions about dog attacks being accidental or criminal is to examine the owners first, then the circumstances surrounding the attack and, lastly, the dogs. Only in this way can the origins and opportunity for canine aggression be determined. While proponents of breed-specific legislation often seem uninterested in recognizing the distinction between dog attacks that can be attributed to canine behavior and those that can be attributed to human behavior, the criminal justice system, the police, and the courts frequently recognize that were it not for the reckless disregard of some dog owners, and/or parents of the victim, these fatalities would not have occurred. Since 1982 there have been at least 29 dog owners found guilty of murder, manslaughter or criminally negligent homicide in cases in which their dogs were involved in a fatal attack. Still other dog owners and/or parents have been found guilty of child neglect, child endangerment, child abuse and reckless injury to a child after a fatal dog attack on a child. Throughout the ages, dogs have been guardians, protectors, companions and playmates to children. Like all friendships, there may be squabbles, misunderstandings and offenses taken, but children and dogs are forgiving creatures, and both usually emerge with only the fondest of memories of their relationships together. There are over 73 million dogs in the United States. The vast majority of these dogs interact on a daily basis with every conceivable type of child, from infants to teenagers, from gentle children to tormenting children, from handicapped children to healthy children and from family children to neighborhood children. The dogs these children live with and are exposed to include almost every recognized purebred dog along with a never-ending variety of mixed breeds. Millions upon millions of children learn about compassion, responsibility, companionship, and respect for others by living with these animals. Virtually all these children enter into adulthood all the better for their experiences with dogs. However, about a dozen times a year, something goes terribly wrong. Statistically, a child has a greater chance of dying from hundreds of other maladies and mishaps, both man-made and natural, than from the bite of a dog. But society is deeply shocked and offended and a child dies from an attack by a dog. For this reason we need to take a closer look at how children come to be exposed to dogs which put them at risk. How a child becomes the victim of a fatal dog attack is dependent on either one or both of these factors: level of responsibility and risk evaluation demonstrated by the parent and/or the failure of the dog owner to evaluate risks and safeguard children from their dogs. More often than not, children who fall prey to dogs do so as a result of negligence by either the parents and/or the dog owner. Sadly, far too many children live with parents or guardians who offer them only a low level of safety. Many of the child victims of fatal dog attacks lived in an environment which allowed for a large margin of error, which in turn invited misfortune. The following cases demonstrate that some victims of fatal dog attacks were children whose parents provided them with only a low level of safety from misadventure. In 2001, a 2-year-old boy was killed by an intact, male-chained dog. It was the middle of the afternoon and the parents were seemingly unaware the child had left the house or had been killed by the dog in their yard. After an undetermined amount of time, the child was discovered dead near the stepfather's chained dog. The stepfather was unconvinced the dog had killed the child, claiming the dog's chain had been the cause of death. The dog, prior to this incident, had killed another dog. The stepfather claimed the death of that dog was also a case of death by chain. The evidence clearly proved the boy was killed as a result of an aggressive attack, bites, from the dog. Yet, the stepfather's refusal to acknowledge the clear evidence was only the latest in a long list of denials and irresponsible ownership practices: unaltered, chained, unsocialized dog, with previous acts of aggression ignored or excused, that directly contributed to the ultimate act of aggression displayed by this dog. It is worthy of note that the boy's funeral needed to be delayed as the parents overslept that morning. A fatality in 2000 involved a 2-year-old girl wandering over to one of 6 dogs kept on a heavy logging chain in the far corners of a yard. The owners of the dog knew it to be dangerous and had warned their own children not to go near him. When a mother and her 2-year-old girl were visiting the house, the child wandered out and was killed by the intact male dog. The owner came home and beat the offending dog to death with a sledgehammer. All 6 dogs in the yard were intact, and one of the female dogs was very pregnant. Investigation revealed that the dog which had killed the child was actively used for fighting and had been matched in a fight only weeks earlier. The mother of the deceased child refused to cooperate in the investigation or assist police. She stated in so many words that she did not want to help police get her friends in trouble. A 2001 fatality involved the tragic circumstances of a young boy who had come to St. Louis with his brother and mother in the winter of 2000. By all accounts, 10-year-old Rodney was a sweet, pleasant and intelligent boy, despite his unstable home environment. Before arriving in St. Louis, Rodney and his brother had been taken twice from their mother by the Missouri Department of Family Services and placed in foster homes. Now returned to his mother, who had a history of drug abuse and an open weapons charge pending in a neighboring county, Rodney appeared to be adapting well to his new location and school. On a Monday evening, around 5 p.m., Rodney's mother saw him leave the house with his basketball. The following morning, police arrived at the mother's doorstep to inform her that her son had been killed by dogs in Ivory Perry Park on either late Monday night or early Tuesday morning. Rodney's mother was unaware that her son had not returned home the night before. She was arrested and charged with endangering the welfare of a child. With no parental interest in keeping this child out of harm's way and no concern for his safety or whereabouts, it is not terribly surprising that this child should be the victim of some type of terrible misfortune. Sadly, dogs were the source of his tragic death. Of course, equally culpable are the unknown owners who abandoned and allowed these dogs to roam loose in the city. One of the most frequent scenarios for dog attacks is children visiting relatives. 17% of the children killed by dogs were attacked by a relative's dog, grandparent, aunt/uncle. While cases of extreme negligence are found here, this is the one area where seemingly innocent mistakes or slight errors in judgment have resulted in tragic consequences. The factors which appear to be at work here are adults, being familiar, or having a bond, with a relative's dog, assume the dog will be equally accepting of their young children, believing their bond with the dog will automatically extend to them. Adults visiting with children fail to take into account the territorial issues found with many dogs. A common scenario is, a woman visits her mother. She is familiar with her mother's dog and perhaps feels comfortable with this dog which has never shown any aggression towards her or her parents. At some point the daughter becomes a mother herself. She continues to visit her parents, but now begins to bring along her child. The dog has had only minimal exposure to this child, and at some point the child and dog are left alone. The dog then attacks this small interloper. The case of a child being killed by a relative's dog is perhaps the scenario in which education may make the biggest difference in the reduction of severe attacks on children. Very often these parents made only minor errors in judgment. Also, many of these parents did have lifestyles in which they provided safe environments for their children. An added awareness of the danger some dogs may present to young visiting children may help these parents avoid attacks on their own children by a relative's dog. While a significant number of fatal attacks on children may have been prevented by either responsible behavior or reasonable risk assessment by a parent and/or dog owner, some cases are truly unforeseeable events. There are a small number of cases in which parents and dog owners seemingly took all necessary precautions prior to a fatal dog attack, yet still suffered the same fate as severely negligent dog owners and/or parents. A sad case of what could only be classified as a terrible accident occurred in April 2004 in Washington. John, an 8-year-old boy, was visiting his next-door neighbor's home. John was inside the home with the teenage boys living there. At some point, John, unnoticed, went into the fenced-in backyard where the family kept 2 large dogs. John knew these dogs and had interacted with them before. For reasons which will never be known, the boy was attacked and killed by either one or both dogs. There is absolutely nothing about this case which suggests the dogs would have behaved this way. The dogs had responsible and quality owners, who maintained them in a controlled and safe environment. The dogs had no other function than that of companion animals and were owned by this family for 3 years, since they were puppies. Even the dogs named Sug, just nice family pets, Precious and Diamond. The dogs were females, although intact, there were no issues with pregnancy or puppies involved. Female dogs without puppies, or not pregnant, are exceedingly rare in cases of fatal canine aggression and are responsible for less than 2% of all fatal dog attacks. The dogs had no history of aggression prior to the attack. They were known to be friendly with neighborhood children. Neighbors unanimously agreed the dog's behavior was always appropriate and non-threatening. The boy had knowledge of these dogs and was aware of their friendly and non-threatening behaviors. He was old enough to make a fair and reasonable assessment of the low risk involved in encountering these animals. No mistakes, no bad risk assessment, no cruelty, negligence, or lack of control over the dogs, just a terrible accident involving a young boy and a tragic event for two families and two dogs. If the reason a person obtains a dog and how the dog is maintained are important signposts on the road to aggression, something as simple as a dog's name is often just as relevant to the future behaviors we expect from our dogs. Suppose you are walking down a street and a short distance off a man is walking towards you with a large, muscular dog. The dog's leash snaps and the dog is leisurely trotting towards you. The owner yells, "Psycho, stop." Now envision the exact same scenario, except the owner yells, "Ladybug, stop." Except for those who are so petrified of dogs, or so brainwashed by the media to fear certain breeds, most people would assess the risk of each of these trotting dogs a tad differently. It is no small coincidence that many of the dogs involved in fatal attacks have indeed been named Crusher, Rage, Psycho, Mayhem, or a host of other names which suggest their owners wished their dogs to appear or, worse, act menacing. Many dogs involved in severe and fatal attacks are found with these menacing, criminal-laced names because they had been acquired for the express purpose of intimidation. The names of these dogs coincide with their use as status symbols by urban thugs in a culture of violence, drug abuse and dog fighting. Environment and maintenance are additional critical factors, along with function and owners, which demonstrate the level of commitment and responsibility an owner has, not only to the dog but also to the community and safety of its inhabitants. Environment is the immediate physical surroundings of the dog, chained dogs, yard dogs, loose roaming dogs, multiple dog situations, unsupervised dogs, isolated and unsocialized dogs. Maintenance is the physical condition of the dog, intact dogs, sick, abused or underweight dogs. Chained dogs. The potential danger of a chained dog stems from rather simple causes. Chained dogs can never be afforded the same level of socialization as household dogs. Chained dogs have a well-defined and limited territory and therefore may exhibit heightened territorial issues. Chained dogs cannot flee a threatening situation, increasing the probability of a defensive, or fear, bite or attack, fight versus flight response. Chained dogs are not able to release pent-up energy or frustration, and this may increase aggressive or abnormal behaviors, pacing, barking, straining at chain, etc. Chained dogs are exposed to extreme weather conditions, and the discomfort of heat, cold, rain, and insects. Also, chained dogs are at the mercy of tormenting children. Untold numbers of chained dogs are injured or die after becoming entangled in chains or ropes or are attacked by loose roaming dogs. None of these are very complex issues. The conditions under which chained dogs are kept are in direct opposition to the conditions needed to produce a well-balanced, social dog. An owner who keeps his dog chained does not recognize or meet the social, emotional, and even most of the physical needs of the animal. Dogs, by nature, require physical exercise, mental stimulation, social and physical interaction with other beings, dogs or human, and a sense of belonging or attachment to other pack members. Depriving dogs of these important behaviors and interactions with humans invites aggression. Putting dogs in situations where they are apt to feel threatened, protective of limited territory, or experience isolation, discomfort, or pain will increase incidence of aggression. This is evidenced by the fact that 25% of all fatal attacks have been inflicted by chained dogs. Dogs that have not been provided the opportunity to develop appropriate social behaviors due to chaining cannot, after an attack on a toddler, be classified as family dogs. Dogs maintained on chains in backyards are not family dogs. The term which correctly identifies the dog is resident dog. The dog resides on the premises of the owner. The dog is not a part of the family. The distinction is important and real because it defines the relationship or bond that is so important in understanding canine perceptions and, hence, behavior. It is exceedingly rare for a family dog to kill an immediate family member, despite what has been reported to the contrary. Dogs attack and severely injure or kill persons to whom they have no bonds or strong attachments. Loose roaming dogs. This is, without a doubt, the longest running and most frequently found complaint about dogs in our society. 100 years ago the newspapers were full of angry letters from citizens from New York to Chicago, complaining about loose dogs attacking livestock and harassing and seriously injuring humans. An owner who allows his dogs to repeatedly run loose, meaning more than once, shows an utter disregard not only for their own dogs, but also for the welfare of their neighbors' animals, and a flagrant disregard for the safety and well-being of persons in their community. Communities which cannot or care not to enforce existing leash laws or cite owners for allowing their dogs to roam should not even consider passing additional dangerous dog legislation if they are unable to effectively and seriously penalize owners who violate this basic rule of canine responsibility. Loose roaming dogs are simply an owner management problem. A free-roaming dog is an animal acting independent of human interests. In urban and residential environments there is great potential for harm when dogs are left to their own devices. Dogs being hit by cars or causing traffic accidents, harassing and chasing other domestic animals or wildlife, as well as threatening or attacking humans, are very real and frequent occurrences when dogs are allowed to roam loose off their property and free of human direction. The dangers here are real and obvious, yet owners continue to allow dogs to operate in this potentially dangerous way. In 1 year only, 2005, 10 persons died because their neighbors failed to contain their dogs on their property. Of these 10 fatal attacks by loose roaming dogs, 8 cases involved owners allowing not only a single dog, but multiple dogs, to run loose. Not only were these dogs allowed to roam loose, but all these cases involved dogs which were intact, not spayed or neutered. Reproductive status of dogs. While politicians and the media love to quote breed statistics, no statistic about the dogs involved in fatal attacks is more overwhelming than the statistical percentage of intact versus altered animals. Over the last 6 years, from 2000 to 2005, there were 131 fatal dog attacks in the United States. 92% of the fatal attacks were inflicted by reproductively intact, unneutered, unspayed dogs. This is a significant percentage and is highly suggestive of certain conditions, reproductively viable, predisposing a dog to aggression. However, no single statistic is a true representation of the behaviors or forces at work driving canine aggression in severe or fatal attacks. Fatal attacks are the result of an escalation of events, behaviors and circumstances which culminate in the opportunity and ability for a dog to behave aggressively. What the statistic 92% of dogs found in fatal aggression were intact does not reveal is the other contributing factors found in the environment and maintenance of these dogs. For instance, over 70% of the intact dogs involved in fatal aggression were maintained in multiple dog residences. This is relevant. Multiple dogs in residence introduce new dynamics to canine behavior not seen in single dog households. This requires owners to be more knowledgeable about intraspecies behaviors and/or aggression and the possible development of pack mentality. Dogs which may never snarl or snap at their owners will frequently growl their displeasure at each other. Dogs in the yard, running along the fence after a boy riding a bicycle on the sidewalk, often feed off each other's excitement. Feeding time in multiple dog households can be tension-filled. There are dozens of situations in which dogs in multiple dog households can trigger each other to behave aggressively. The most obvious situation which may trigger intact male dogs to behave aggressively is the nearby presence of a female in estrus. Dozens of cases of fatal dog attacks involved intact males with females in estrus nearby. Whether this was the singular cause for aggression cannot be determined, but undoubtedly any behaviors of the male would be more intense. Of course, female dogs, intact and bred, may exhibit heightened aggression if there are puppies on site. Indeed, this is when female dogs are found in fatal attacks. Not surprisingly, this is one of the very few situations in which male and female dogs are found together and the female initiates the attack on a human. In almost all other witnessed cases of fatal attacks on humans, when a male and female dog were together, the male was observed to be the instigator or initiated the attack. The point about intact dogs involved in fatalities is not just that they were intact, but that they were more likely than not to be kept in multiple dog residences, and more likely than not to be active in breeding for the financial gain of their owners. So while the singular circumstance of being intact may seem indicative of increased aggression in dogs, there are almost always other risk factors involved. Single dog and multiple dog situations in fatal attacks. Single dogs. During the past 40 years, from 1966 to 2005, 65% of the human fatalities from a dog attack were the result of being attacked by a single dog. However, in the vast majority of these cases there were other dogs on the premises or near the scene at the time of the attack. In the 6-year span, from 2000 to 2005, in over 87% of the cases of fatal attacks by a single dog, there were other dogs in residence or situated near the attack. While many of these other dogs were not able to participate due to barriers or restraints, there were a number of dogs certainly able to join the attack that simply did not. Even in cases of the alleged dangerous breeds, there are incidents of one dog attacking while multiple other dogs on the scene do not participate. The behaviors of these non-participating dogs are remarkable in their restraint and inhibition. While the behavior of the one dog beginning a frenzied attack on a human must be recognized for the extraordinarily aggressive act that it is, dogs standing off and refraining from entering into a pack mentality or pack attack require equal weight in the assessment of canine, or breed, behaviors and temperament. Yet, incredibly, these behaviors, of non-attacking dogs, are never studied or given recognition in discussions of canine, or breed, temperament. The breed of the male dog that killed a little girl in a field after she screamed when a lizard ran over her shoe has been permanently documented in the statistics as indicative of the dangerousness of this particular breed. Yet, the behavior of the female dog, of the same breed, that was also at the scene but did not participate, and was even witnessed biting the rump of the male during his attack on the little girl, has gone unrecognized. Yet, her behavior in defining breed temperament is as revealing and significant as the behavior of the attacking male. Multiple dogs. Over the last 40 years, 1966 to 2005, 35% of all fatal dog attacks have involved more than one dog. When dogs operate as a pack, their potential to do harm is obvious. Dogs will often feed off each other's excitement, thereby increasing and prolonging an aggressive episode. In multiple dog attacks, injuries and bites are apt to be more numerous and occur more rapidly. Many a victim who may have been able to survive or ward off an attack by one dog succumbed due to the force of multiple dogs. Not all dogs in a pack situation attack with the same intensity. Some dogs will attack seemingly without inhibition, inflicting deep, penetrating wounds. Other dogs, oftentimes the females, may participate by worrying the victim, tearing at the clothes or inflicting lesser bites. An example of this is the infamous Diane Whipple case which occurred in San Francisco in 2001. Here, two large dogs escaped from their owner's control and attacked the gym teacher in the hallway of their apartment. Bane, the male, was observed to be the aggressor, inflicting most of the severe and ultimately fatal bites. Hera, the female, was less active in the attack, primarily worrying the victim, rather than inflicting severe bites. In multiple dog attacks that are not witnessed, it is often impossible to know the exact level of participation of each of the dogs involved. Naturally, in large packs, of 4 or more dogs, it is often impossible to know how many, and to what degree, each of the dogs participated. Bite impressions of the dog's teeth, examination of stomach contents, DNA and saliva testing will often assist in identifying the major offenders, but may reveal little about the behavior of the other dogs in the pack. A case in which the stomach contents of the dogs did reveal the obvious offenders occurred in 1990, when a 44-year-old woman was killed by dogs she maintained on her property. There were 11 dogs on the premises, which she and her husband declared to be their pets. The house was in a dilapidated condition, with huge cracks in the walls through which the dogs could enter and exit at will. 2 of the dogs appeared well fed, while the other 9 dogs were emaciated. All 9 dogs were each at least 20 pounds underweight, with some of them being, as one official stated, skin and bones. The female owner had a history of seizures. It is believed she suffered a seizure while alone in the home, and this may have triggered this large pack of starving dogs to attack her. While the 2 well-fed dogs were determined not to have participated in the attack, examination of the contents of the stomachs of the starving dogs revealed that 7 of the 9 actively participated in the attack. Like most fatal attacks, multiple risk factors need to be present before dogs behave so aggressively. Besides these dogs operating as a large pack, starvation, poor environment, possible seizure activity in the owner and perhaps other forces were in place which allowed them to behave in the manner they did. The familiar bond and the family dog. If you get to thinking you're a person of some influence, try ordering somebody else's dog around. Will Rogers. Unfortunately, this simple witticism, defining how canine behavior is dependent on the familiar bond between owner and dog, is lost on many people today. Dogs behave differently with those to whom they have formed strong attachments than they do with more unfamiliar persons. For centuries this has been understood, embraced, and heralded as the essence of dogs. Yet, today, this defining aspect of canine behavior is either grossly misrepresented or has been given no recognition in the recounting of dog attacks. The denial or ignorance of this basic tenet, which so often drives canine behavior and aggression, has led to erroneous claims of the unpredictable nature of dogs and dog attacks. Today, dozens of studies, quotes and percentages can be found claiming that family dogs are responsible for the majority of bites and attacks on children. However, even the most cursory examination of these stories about family dogs attacking children quickly reveals that many of these claims are a perversion of the familiar bond. Scores of examples can be given in which dogs, either seriously under-socialized, chained, used for breeding, guard dog use, and/or kept in isolated and even in extremely abusive conditions, were labeled as family dogs. Family dog versus resident dog. Though discussed previously, it needs to be stressed that dogs maintained outside the home, on chains, in kennels or in yards, and dogs obtained for negative functions, guarding, fighting, protection, breeding for financial gain, are not family dogs, they are resident dogs. This distinction is vital in the understanding of canine behavior and aggression. Dogs maintained as resident dogs cannot be expected to exhibit the same level of sociability as dogs afforded the opportunity to interact with humans and their families on a daily basis and in positive and more humane functions. The fact that there is no documented case of a single, spayed/neutered pit bull or pit bull type dog, maintained exclusively as a household pet, involved in a fatal attack on a human in the United States is proof that canine behavior is profoundly influenced by the function of the dog and quality of care and control practiced by owners. It has always been mankind's great fortune that most dogs, despite the low level of care and control demonstrated by many of their owners and their acquisition for negative functions, are nevertheless wonderfully tolerant and sociable toward humans. It is for this reason that we often expect all dogs to behave amicably. However, dogs will, and do, bite. Therefore, any serious study on the reasons and causes for dog attacks requires a truthful examination of each individual dog, the function for which the dog was obtained and how the dog was maintained. This is the first critical step toward understanding how a dog had the ability and opportunity to behave aggressively towards a human. Dogs are predators. Predators chase and kill other animals. Aggression is a natural part of dog behavior, used to lay claim to resources, guard territory, protect offspring or ward off perceived dangers. Dogs are sentient beings, capable of experiencing pain, anger, fear and frustration. Dogs have different signs and signals they use to communicate intentions or emotions, and these are very different than the vocalizations and signals humans use to communicate intent or emotion. Because of all these things, dogs bite. They bite other animals, they bite each other and they bite humans. Sometimes we can understand or relate to the reasons why dogs attack, other times the bite or attack seems to us to be unwarranted or vicious. As humans often have a difficult enough time understanding the intentions or aggressive behavior found in our own species, it should come as no surprise that the behavior of dogs should also at times confound and confuse us. Few things in life come without some level of risk. Swimming pools, automobiles, household cleaning products, power tools, bicycles, stairs, and dogs all come with a certain level of potential harm. Our lives are comprised of evaluating risks on a daily basis. From how fast we drive our cars or when to cross a busy street, or cordoning off swimming pools and staircases from unsupervised children, we think about or act on the potential danger of things daily. Why then is it so difficult for so many people to understand that this applies to our dogs as well? While dogs are certainly less of a risk factor than automobiles or swimming pools, nevertheless, the same theory applies. Dogs are safe when maintained in a responsible manner and when people show a reasonable level of risk assessment. Terrible, unforeseeable accidents will always occur in life, but the point is to strive to make these incidents as rare as possible. There are presently 73 million dogs in the United States, and approximately 24 human deaths per year are due to dog attacks. In approximately 1/2 to 3/4, 12 to 18, of these deaths, the victims are young children. However, over 250 children under the age of 5 die yearly in swimming pools. Comparing yearly dog bite fatalities to yearly fatalities associated with automobiles, swimming pools, or lightning shows that dogs are incredibly low on the list of potential dangers. While the risk of being killed by a dog is extremely low, serious dog bites and attacks obviously present a likelier risk. Both serious and fatal attacks can be reduced by reasonable risk assessment. Owners can reduce the risk of their dog biting someone through dozens of different methods, from educating themselves about canine behavior and enrolling in dog training classes to properly containing and supervising their dogs. Potential victims can also reduce their risk of dog attacks by learning about canine behaviors and how to respond to an aggressive-looking dog. There are literally hundreds of books written on these topics, as well as information presented on the internet, television, and even radio. For those wishing to educate themselves and lower the potential risk associated with dogs, the information is available and highly accessible. However, just as there will always be murderers and reckless drivers, there will always be some dog owners who refuse to safeguard others from their dogs, and there will always be some victims who not only fail to make an appropriate risk assessment in a situation involving dogs, but were reckless. In 2006, an adult male climbed over a fence at 5:30 a.m. and entered into the yard of a metalworking company in California. 3 large guard dogs were kept on the premises. The man was attacked and killed by the dogs. In 1997, a man took possession of 2 large dogs and placed them in the fenced yard behind his trailer. In addition to obtaining the male and female for use as guard dogs, he intended to breed them to make some money. 4 days later his girlfriend arrived with her 3-year-old son. Authorities believe the mother and her boyfriend were in a drug-induced stupor when the boy wandered into the backyard where he was attacked by the dogs. An autopsy revealed the boy lay dying in the yard for at least 2 hours before either adult awoke and realized the child was missing. While there is much society and individuals can do to reduce attacks, the 2 cases cited above demonstrate that there will always be incidents of severe or fatal dog attacks due to some people's failure to take any appropriate steps to safeguard themselves or others from their dogs. If we are truly interested in reducing the number of attacks, we need to honestly examine which behaviors are the major contributors to these events, human or canine. Unfortunately, the way canine aggression is usually examined is by simply referring to the number of deaths or bites attributed to dogs and not by an examination of the forces driving behavior. It is inaccurate and unreliable to use the number of fatal dog attacks, and or which breeds are involved, as proof of canine aggression. The reason for this is that it fails to identify exactly what it claims to be providing evidence of, namely aggression. Consider the following deaths which are included in the Centers for Disease Control statistics on dog bite-related deaths in the United States. A man is bitten on the thumb by a dog. Introduced into the wound is a rapidly spreading and virulent bacteria, which results in the man's death 4 days later. A woman dies after her boyfriend physically restrains her, while repeatedly ordering his dog to attack her. A 2-day-old infant dies after a dog picks the child up by the head and carries the infant into the room where the parents are. A dog attacks his longtime owner, inflicting dozens of deep, penetrating wounds, resulting in the woman's death. These 4 deaths tell us only one thing: 4 people died as a result of dog bites. They tell us nothing about the level and type of aggression, or define what aggression is. Lumping these disparate events together misconstrues the very nature of the behavior. Is a bite to the thumb the same type of aggression as a dog inflicting dozens of penetrating and lethal bites? Is a dog that attacks due to repeated commands from his owner showing the same type of aggression as a dog that attacks a person of his own initiative? Is a dog that picks a baby up by the head and carries it into the room with the owners committing an aggressive act? You cannot provide proof of something which you have not defined. Yet these types of statistics are routinely used to prove the aggressiveness of certain breeds. The answers to severe and fatal canine attacks are not to be found in statistics, or in discussing dog breeds, or in recent accounts of dog attacks found in the media. The answers to canine aggression can only be found beginning with an examination of the relationship, or lack of one, between dogs and owners.